I picked this song coming back here on purpose. Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. So I am still blinded by that awful, terrible Penn State loss. As a Penn State alum, if you couldn't tell, very, very, very excited for the Big Ten return. Put on social media my excitement. I really thought, this is a season where Penn State had kind of everything building towards a possible run to the college football playoff. Second-year quarterback returning. I understand that their best offensive player in Journey Brown opted out for medical reason, or I shouldn't say opted out, can't play because of medical reason. Their best defensive player, the best overall player, Micah Parsons, opted out because he is a stud, going to go in the top 5 in the NFL draft most likely. But I still had hope. I still had faith that this team could turn around, could be real contenders. And you know what? In a wacky, crazy year, despite the fact that Ohio State returns Justin Fields, is loaded after that college football playoff appearance last year, then maybe they could get him. Maybe they can make a run. Shock the world. At least put up a fight. And I do want to get into Ohio State because I don't think they look bulletproof. We'll get to that in a second. I do want to talk about Michigan. Oh, they're back. They had an impressive win over Minnesota on Saturday night. But Penn State fans, if you're listening, college football fans, if you're listening, wow. I wish as a Penn State fan and a Penn State alum, I could sit here today on Monday, October 26th, and complain about the referees, crush the referees, and blame them solely for the loss on Saturday night. I wish I could. I wish, and I will put this on the record right now. This is not sour grapes. This is not looking at it through a Penn State colored glasses. Objectively. The ball, the Indiana, but their quarterback Michael Penix Jr. is rushing for the 2-point conversion. The ball hit out of bounds before it hit the pylon. I think that, to me, it was clear. I thought on the replay that FS1 showed was clear. I thought the call was missed. I do. With that said, this is one of the most frustrating Penn State losses of my life. Not because of the circumstance. But they're number 8, lost to an unranked team. Because we've seen that a bunch already. Right? Oklahoma lost at home to Kansas State. Texas lost at home to TCU. Florida lost to Texas A&M. We've already seen some good teams lose to some lesser opponents. And that's college football. Upsets happen all the time. It's why we love it. Chaos. But the way Penn State came out, the way they looked sluggish, sloppy, like they didn't know what they were doing, they beat themselves. And that is the most frustrating part of watching that game. And that's the most frustrating part. Sitting here on a Monday, 48 hours after the loss, still frustrated, still disgusted. Because when it comes down to it, they didn't lose because of a blown call. They didn't lose because the referees took the ball out of their hands or didn't make the correct call. Penn State only has really one person to blame for that loss, and it's themselves. They beat themselves time after time after time on Saturday. And sure, in the end, we're going to talk about a controversial 2-point conversion, which again, I thought he was out of bounds. I thought Penn State should have got the win. But regardless, you put yourself in that situation because you go 0-3 kicking field goals. Miss every field goal you attempt. They fumble inside the 10-yard line. And going in when you're just looking sluggish, looking dead on offense, you fumble inside the 10-yard line. 3 turnovers. 2 interceptions by Sean Clifford again in that fumble inside the goal line, or I should say inside the 10-yard line. And they committed 10 penalties for 100 yards. I'm going to read you 2 stats right here. And I want to make my head explode. And again, this loss is up there with the 2017 Ohio State loss on the road, where I thought Penn State was going to the playoff. They're up by 15 points in the fourth quarter in Ohio Stadium. Blew that game. There's too many games, honestly, I can point to that have frustrated me, but this one stands out as one of the worst. Penn State outgained Iowa. Penn State outgained Indiana 488 to 211. 488 to 211. They doubled them up and then some. Went up and down the field on them. They held on to the ball for over 40 minutes. Indiana barely touched the ball. They were barely on the field. But yet, they did it to themselves. Penn State beat themselves. And now, Oh, boy. Going week number 2. Playing Ohio State. This is... Whew. They have a lot of work to do, and then even then some, I'm not sure. It is not a good time to be a Nittany Lion fan. I don't want to talk about it anymore because, honestly, I love college football. I listen to a ton of college football podcasts. I'll read a ton of college football articles. I don't even know if I can do that this week, to be honest. It's just so infuriating when you have so much hype, right? We've been sitting here really since the season ended back in January, looking towards 2020 to be the year. The pandemic strikes. We don't know if college football is going to be back. The Big Ten doesn't know if they're going to be back. They cancel the season. Then all of a sudden they say they're going to be on. And there was just a lot of excitement, a lot of buildup. And to have it come out like that, no, it's not what you want. So James Franklin, I don't, this is what I understand about James Franklin. I think there's a lot of unfair criticism towards James Franklin more than I'm more of a Franklin defender than maybe most. But since he got there in 2014, it is the same prevalent problem time in and time out, year in and year out. His clock management, I don't understand. The clock management can be this bad every single year, every single week. But it's like James Franklin just does not know how to work a clock. Penn State takes a knee at the end of the game. They have the ball. Indiana's one time out. Indiana gets the ball like 30 seconds left. The game's almost likely over. And Penn State can't even do that right. Just infuriating. Just absolutely infuriating. And what makes it honestly even more frustrating, because now I want to transition to Ohio State. I'm not saying Ohio State's a bad team. I'm not saying Ohio State really is vulnerable too much. But like I said, when I read a lot of college football articles, and I read or listen to, I should say, a lot of big college football podcasts, specifically Big Ten podcasts, because that's, that's my conference. I was told weekly, daily, depending on, my consumption, Ohio State, if you're going to try to find a blemish, it's like looking for a pimple on a beauty queen. You could split hairs if you want to, but there's nothing really there. You have to dig really, really, really deep to find something wrong with Ohio State. But obviously, as we know, Justin Fields, one of the best quarterbacks in college football. 1A to Trevor Lawrence. He's back. The wide receivers are great. The offensive line is great. They have some pieces on defense. But it's Ohio State. They rolled last year. As you know, it's a quarterback league. You have the quarterback, you have that coach, you're good. And the score isn't indicative of what I'm about to say, because they blew out Nebraska 52-17, right? Not even a game. To me, they didn't look bulletproof. They didn't look invincible, as everyone tried to say they were. That defense has some real concerns. They allowed 210 rushing yards to Nebraska. 210. The game was tied. 14-14. Now again, the final score is 52-17. But one game in, this Ohio State defense to me reminds me more of the 2018 version, which if you remember that team led by Dwayne Haskins, that team had elite offense. Their defense was putrid. Awful. They played a lot of close games because that defense could not stop anybody. They made a change of defensive coordinator last year. Their defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, turned complete 180. They go from a terrible, leaky defense to a dominant, stout defense. But Jeff Hafley gets a head coaching job at Boston College. Chase Young goes to the draft. Jeff Okudah goes to the draft. They had Ohio State players on defense taking number 2 in the draft and number 3 in the draft. It's not easy or guaranteed to just be able to reload and say, you know what, yeah, the defense will be fine. And they blew out Nebraska in part because Nebraska is not a good team. And the talent gap between Ohio State and Nebraska is like the talent or the gap between the Atlantic Ocean, between us here and Britain on the other side of the Atlantic. It's a massive gap. Massive. But what happens when you play a better team? Now, this was my hope that a Penn State team could be able to take advantage of this, but can't say I feel confident. I can't even say that with a straight face right now after watching last week. Maybe it's Michigan. We'll get to them in a second. This defense, again, granted, one game with a new defensive coordinator with a lot of new guys in new spots. Obviously, as we know, with the offseason being as weird and wacky as it was, Teams need time to adjust. Players need time to adjust. This is their first real game action they've had. So you're going to need some time to get on the same page, get the rust off. But there's some vulnerabilities there. This team isn't invincible. The defense, again, to me, it looked like more a 2018 version than 2019 version, which is scary. And not scary in a good way. Scary because that could hold them back. And to be honest, the rushing attack, not as lethal as it was in years past. J.K. Dobbins, a total stud for Ohio State the last few years. Total stud. One of the best running backs in all of college football. Well, he's gone. He goes to the NFL. The Ohio State running attack was just all right. A lot of it was on Justin Fields' shoulders. He was a leading rusher after all. He led the team in rushing on Saturday. They got Trey Sermon, transfer from Oklahoma, ran for 48 yards. Master Teague, that was supposed to be the guy to take over the role for the most part, rushed for 41 yards. They have no real explosion so far in the backfield. Which again, if you watch Ohio State last year, J.K. Dobbins was the engine that could for Ohio State. He made explosive run after explosive run, and that opened the pass game for Justin Fields. Which makes this week's matchup against Penn State interesting, considering Penn State allowed just 1.6 yards per rush against Indiana. Now again, Penn State has their own problems. But Ohio State, not bulletproof, not invincible, I don't think, like we were told. I think that defense is a real concern, and we'll see if the running game can develop, but so far, a little bit concerned about the running game, or I should say lack thereof. And finally, I want to ask you this question. Are you believing in Michigan at all? Is Michigan back? Because this was a game, honestly, going into it, when they went on the road to play number 21 Minnesota, College game days there. P.J. Fleck had a lot of momentum with Minnesota last year, a lot of success building back on that. They had their best receiver, Rashad Bateman, opt back in after initially opting out. Returned their quarterback, Tanner Morgan. There was a lot of momentum, a lot of reasons to me why I thought Minnesota was going to win this game. And not only did Michigan win, they dominated. 49-24. And for the first time, maybe it feels like in the Jim Harbaugh era, they played to their strengths. They have a very solid offensive line as they do most years. They rushed for 253 yards as a team. And the quarterback, Joe Milton, really the first dual-threat quarterback that Jim Harbaugh has had at Michigan. And you see the success he has. This Michigan team, for the first time, and honestly, I can't even tell you how long. Maybe the Chad Henne, Ryan Hart? I forget his first name. Mike Hart. The Chad Henne, Mike Hart days. Was this team explosive? Was this team fun to watch on offense? They were a plodding, boring, old school, outdated, antiquated offense for most of the years under Jim Harbaugh. Whether it was Jake Rudock, you had Wilton Spate. Shea Patterson was more mobile, but they didn't allow him to really use his feet that much. That offense finally looked like it was alive. It had some competency for the first time in the 5+ years Jim Harbaugh's been there. Now, I'm not ready to say Michigan's back at all. Not close. But I will say this about Michigan. I am more intrigued by them than I was, let's say, this time last week. They really impressed me on Saturday night. Now, does that translate that they'll finally beat Ohio State this year? I don't think so. But I thought Michigan had another 5-3, maybe even 4-4 season in them, to be honest. Because I didn't trust them to win the big games they should. Now, obviously, again, it's about consistency. But it's about doing it week in and week out. We'll see, again, despite the fact that Minnesota is ranked number 21, we'll see truly the next few weeks how good they actually were and how good this win was. But for the first time in a while, I was impressed by Michigan. I was impressed by their offense. I was impressed by the explosiveness that their team had, because it was not a common sight that we've seen so far under Jim Harbaugh.